Alright guys, it's Shalom with the Paradox Gaming Network, and today I'm diving back into Archeage Unchained. I'm going to give you that class system big picture overview, and then I'm going to talk about several key changes to the class system over the years, because no matter where you're coming from, either brand new character or even somebody who's currently playing, there's a lot of things that are going to be different in 6.0. Now what you see on the screen, that is my class gear build triangle. I know it looks a little complicated, don't be scared. So as we jump in today, I want to let you guys know I haven't remade this video. So there is a video that I have from earlier this year on classes. I suggest you jump into that. That has different information. I also have specific videos on bards and healers already done from earlier in the year. And then the website, it's still a little rough around the edges, but I go into a lot more detail because it's a website and it's kind of like written as a textbook. Now, I want to give my new players some quick class facts. You have access to all 12 skill trees on one character. This gives you access to 220 classes. If you don't like the starting trees you pick at character creation, don't worry about it. You can change those at any Nui Priestess or at a skill trainer. In Archeage, there really isn't a need to have alts on your account to play other classes. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of bits and pieces of equipment that you're going to share across classes. For example, there's 36 different healer classes. There's 36 different bard classes. There's 36 different mage classes for sorcery. When you add in malediction, there's an amazing number of different options for what you want to do. Now, I am going to say this, there are some exceptions to this. And if you know what those exceptions are, then your level of knowledge is already above the 101 level. So the other big change for my returning players is in skill points. And you only get 18 skill points now, but you don't pay for passives. You only get passives when you spend enough points in the tree. Now, each row's last ability requires an investment of points to unlock, and then you still need to buy it. So once you have that certain number of points invested, and it's 3, 4, and 5 per row, then you can spend another point and unlock that ability. So what I mean by this is, here is my Doombringer build, and what you'll see up here is I've spent 10 points in this Vitalism tree, so I have all 7 passives unlocked. In the next tree over, I would not be eligible to buy Hell Spears, because I've only spent 3 points in the tree. I'd have to spend a 4th point in the tree to have Hell Spears become accessible, and then I'd have to spend a point to get it. And then this is sort of like what's going on in Shadowplay. I've spent 5 points in Shadowplay. I spent 4. My 5th was to pick up Stealth. So when I got the 5th, I got the passive. Because I've spent 5 now, Throw Dagger is available to me. And if I were to buy Throw Dagger, I would unlock that 6-point passive because I now would have spent 6 points in the tree. Now, another big thing that's been happening lately is people are crossing over player level versus skill tree level because they're hearing stuff like ancestral skill level. And I wanna just make sure we zero this out and get everybody on the same page. You have a player level, and each of your skill trees will level. Your player level goes from level 1 to level 55. And then at level 55, it transitions to Ancestral level 1 and goes from Ancestral level 1 to Ancestral level 55. Now, as you're doing that, each Ancestral level is going to give you accuracy, toughness, received damage reduction, and resilience. Now, I'm not going to go into any of that stuff today, but I want you to have heard these terms. That way, when I do go into them later, you'll be like, oh, I remember that from the classes overview. Now, when it comes to skill trees, these go level 1 to level 55, and that's it. There is no XP after level 55. The ancestral skills that we'll talk about when we do the ancestral skills video, these are all tied to your character level. And you're going to hear me talk about this if you stop by my Twitch, and that's why I want you to hear this, because I'm going to talk about ancestral level 10 for Vitalism, Flame Holy Bolt. And I don't want you to think that your skill tree needs to go to ancestral 10. Now here's my advice, so it's in green. Level your other skill trees because it just creates options. In just a little bit, I'm going to show you the class triangle, and you need to be able to plug and play in a lot of different trees. Now, a lot of common questions I've been getting is just straight, simple questions. What armor should I use? What weapon do I want? What skills do I want? What class do I want? Well, unlike a lot of other MMORPGs, Archeage Combat isn't simply a rock, paper, scissors setup. I know a lot of games are set up with hard counter classes. The problem is that it's more in-depth than that. Archeage balancing is rock, paper, scissors with a throw of a dice, with a draw of a card, with a flip of a coin. Now, what do I mean by that? So there's a whole lot of different factors you have to look at. If I were to say to you, your main tree versus their main tree, battle rage versus sorcery, all the melee characters are going to say that mages are a problem because of X. All the mages are going to say battle rage players are a problem because of X. But it's really not the main skill trees that are causing the problem. It's the armor. It's your armor versus their armor. So if you're a melee in plate versus a mage in plate, what's really happening is your primary skill tree is being hard countered by the mage's armor, and the mage's primary skill tree is not being hard countered because plate is vulnerable to magic damage. Now, here's where that draw of the card out of the deck comes from. It's your class versus their class, not just your main tree. So if you have battle rage and you're wearing plate, but you have oromancy, you have a skill tree that hard counters their primary tree. So then we get into the coin toss of it really becomes a matter of who's more skilled. Is it your skill or their skill? And I make sure to drive that point home because a lot of people are going to run into hard counter classes early on Unchained because everything's going to be new and people don't have 5 years of buildup behind them. So now armor changes. What I do want to let you guys know is that we're expecting these right off the bat in Unchained in 6.0. They may not be. I don't have official word that we're going to get them. These actually came in Korea 6.0.2 when the siege changes came. It is very likely that these will be in on launch day, and even if they're not, they're going to show up very quickly afterwards. We will check the PTS when it comes up. We have been told we're not getting the PTS this weekend. So plate is going to be getting a penalty for mana usage. It's going to be losing some physical defense and gaining some magic defense. It's going to be having increased max health, and it will now have the lowest bonus skill damage and healing percentage increase. Now, my new players, I know that sounds Greek to you. Just hold it in memory. Just be familiar with it. And then when we talk about specific builds, skill trees later on, again, you'll reference it and be like, oh, that sounds vaguely familiar. Leather is going to stay the same on the trip debuff, the bow range. It is going to have the highest bonus skill damage and healing damage. I'm going to tell you right now, I know it's tempting to want to say I'm going to go leather because I want that highest bonus skill damage. Unless you know what you're doing, commit to cloth or commit to plate. Only the people who are able to properly manipulate their classes, their gear, their builds should be trying to capture that. And at the end of the day, it's not that much of a buff. Cloth is going to have an actual decrease to mana used. The same standard debuff it has, CC duration debuff it has now. And then it's going to have a slightly lower bonus skill damage and healing percentage than leather. Now, I want you all to think about future-proofing your gear. Plate is overtuned in Korea Archeage, and they've been making adjustments for the first time in 6 years. Going full plate is a risk, and I'm going full plate, and I acknowledge the risk. They may change it even more in patches to come, so you make your decision. You're not going to hear me say you should do this. You're going to hear me say you could do this. I would do this. If I was going to play a healer, I would go plate. But you're your own player. You make your own decisions. Now, weapon changes. For all my old players, all the old weapon passives are gone. Hidden crit, hidden def pen, attack speed, all of those are gone. What you have now is 3 damage types. You have slashing, piercing, and crushing. You can see each one has a damage modifier versus a specific type of armor. This is going to fall into some of your decision making. Now, I didn't go in depth with this. I will when we start getting into some more grassroots level stuff. These different weapons have different attack speeds, which affects your global cooldown. I want you to hear that, because don't think, oh, I'm going to go for a crushing weapon because it's the biggest damage, but there's a lot more to it. So I'm just showing the weapon change up here. I'll get into the other parts of it when we deep dive. Now, the meat of today is the class gear build triangle. If you've been on my Twitch, you've seen this. I've modified it a little bit now for Unchained. So this is how you build a class and a overall character. You have your class, and then you have your gear in your build, and your gear and your build sort of provide the foundation for how you're going to play your class. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can go about building your character. You obviously pick your class first, and then you can come down the side to say, what gear do I want? Do I want cloth? Do I want leather? Do I want plate? What weapon do I want? Do I want a dual wield? Do I want to use a two-hander? Do I want to use a main hand weapon and a shield? And then when you do all of that, you have to ask yourself the question, what weaknesses does that leave? If you're going plate, you obviously have the weakness of a magic defense hole. If you're going a two-hander, you have the weakness of you don't have a shield. So then the question becomes, can my build plug that weakness? And what I mean by that is when you go to your build, what am I using my class for? Am I being a tank? Am I being burst DPS? Am I being a healer? And what skills do I need to make that happen? And then what gear do I need to make that happen? So if I want to be a bursty DPS, I probably want to be a two-hander. So that drives the decision to be the two-hander. I acknowledge the lack of a shield. I acknowledge the hole in both my physical and or magic defense that's going to occur. Now, the other big part of this is that when you have your class, you're made up of a damage tree, and you're made up of two sub-trees, utility and mobility. Now, before I get too far into this, I do want to put a caveat out there for the more advanced players. I'm going to talk a primary damage tree. For healers, this is vitalism. For everybody else, it's battle rage, sorcery, archery. Now, I know my mages out there are going to say, but malediction is a primary tree. And yes, it is. And people who are waiting for 6.0, Swiftblade is a primary tree. And yes, it is. But if you know what you're doing well enough to take sorcery and malediction or battle rage and Swiftblade, again, your knowledge level is above the 101 level, and you're out there experimenting, doing your own thing. For everybody else, you're going to take a primary tree, you're going to take tree 2, you're going to take tree 3, and then you're going to ask yourself, what mobility does this tree give me? What utility does this tree give me? And what synergy does this tree give me? And you'll notice that these lines are arrowed at both ends, because not only do these trees create synergy with the main tree, they create synergy with each other. All right, so what I want to do here is I want to use the triangle to show you guys how I build out a class from building the class and building the character. So for this example, I'm going to be building a healer. So right off the bat, I put vitalism at the top of my pyramid. And I want to make a tanky healer. So the mentality is that I want to take defense, and then once I have defense, I feel a little bit better about my tankiness, my survivability. Now, mobility-wise, I have none. Defense doesn't give me any mobility. Utility-wise, I get, right off the bat, I get Readout, which gives me shield block. I get Refreshment, immunity to impale. When I dig into it a little more, I have stuns, I have invincibilities, I have imprisons. I've got bits and pieces in there that make me a little bit more survivable. When I get into the synergy, what is the synergy between vitalism and defense? There is only one. It's Mirror's Light plus Shield Slam will create a stagger effect. So it's not amazing synergy. The other one is, I know people are going to say, oh, well, I remember Templars. And Templars are very good. So when I take Oromancy, I get my Templar. For mobility, I'm going to pick up Teleport. For utility, I'm going to get Thwart, which is a 5k shield. I'm going to get Conversion Shield, which is anti-magic. I'm going to get Shrug It Off, which is anti-CC and anti-magic. And synergy, there are several with defense. Now, when I talk about synergy, I want you guys to pop over to Archeage Codex And what you see here is I've put a Templar into the calculator. And then I can also bring up this list, which is going to show me all of my skill combos. All of the skill combos are their synergies that I'm talking about. How do the two trees work together? Some have only one or two. One that I show you a little bit later is like 150. So now I've decided I'm going to be a Templar. So I come back to my gear and my build. So I slide this over here, and I know that I have Vitalism, Defense, and Oromancy. And I know that I want to be a tanky healer, so I'm going to talk about my gear first, and I decide I want to run Hiram Plate. So I immediately understand that my weakness is my Magic Defense hole. Even though they're changing the plate in 6.0, Magic Defense is still going to be my vulnerability. And I also know that I have a weapon restriction. I must have a club or a great club, because that is the only place I can get healing power from. Now with that, can my build plug in these holes? Well, with Conversion Shield and Shrug It Off, Protective Wings, those will all fill in my plate magic defense weakness. And Life Readout, I can use that with a two-hander if I won't have a shield. If I decide to run a Great Club, I can then run Life Readout. So I won't have a shield, but I can still get the physical defense bonus. Will I need that if I'm running plate? No. So then I have to sit down and think to myself, if I have the ability to run Life Readout with a two-hander, do I have to go plate, or could I run cloth? And if I run cloth, what can I change? And then this is that cycle that I talk about. When people stop by my show and they say, how should I be geared? What should I do? You can't just ask one question. You see, as I work my way around the triangle, it changes some things. Now, I did tell somebody that I would do this. I'm going to give you one more example for my old school players, and they want to talk mages. And can an old school mage build still work? Now, if you put mage at the top and you put sorcery, and a lot of people who remember this build know how broken it was. Demonologist used to be a completely ridiculous, powerful AoE build, but it lacked a certain survivability. So I'm going to add in Occultism, and I'm going to add in Witchcraft, and that gives me Demonologist. For mobility, I've now picked up Shadow Step, and for those of you that are coming back after a long time, yes, Shadow Step is now in Occultism. For utility, I get self-heals, I get slows, traps, impales. The synergy on this is there are 47 synergies with sorcery. As far as Witchcraft, and a cast time passive. There's a cast time passive, so Occultism really does synergize with sorcery. When I go over to Witchcraft, I get another mobility in Mirror's Warp. Yeah, I know. I have no idea why Mirror's Warp is in Witchcraft, but that's where they put it. Utility, I get a Purge. I get several CCs. I get a stun. I get the Mana Drain from Enervate, which is going to be useful against people in Plate because they're going to have a mana usage penalty. Synergy. When I add in Witchcraft, I have 150 synergies between the three trees. And I also have another cast time passive. So yes, Demonologist, with the changes to adding Shadow Step and Mirror's Warp into those trees, definitely something to look at for everybody. For the older players who know Demo, definitely consider it. Some classes to investigate. I know people are like, just give me a class and give me a build. You know I don't do that. I don't hand out cookie cutter builds. I do have some templates, some starters over on my website. But beyond that, what you need to do is you need to link up with people who can give you more than just the build and the cookie cutter, that can tell you why you're doing certain things. But to help you get your first foot off right. Tanks, you want to look at Templar, Argent, Paladin, Abolisher, Blighter. I'm big into self-sustain heal tanks. That's just me. You can also do Skull Knight. I didn't put Skull Knight up here on the list because it doesn't have a auto damage fill-in ability, and that's a big one that people are gonna. Well, what am I supposed to be doing? That's why it's not on the list. For the melee damage dealers, Dark Runner, Executioner, Blighter. Now I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say Blighters in both. Yes. How you build a class determines what you use that class for, but you can tank perfectly fine on Blighter. Mages, Spellsinger, Reaper, Enigmatist. There are a ton of other mage builds out there. These are just the ones that I think somebody who knows nothing might want to investigate over on Archeage Codex and start learning and reading. This is also why I said you level all your skill trees, because it creates options. Archers, Primeval, Shade Hunter, Trickster, Evan's Song at the end. You really need to get into the Songcraft changes. They have gutted Songcraft, so Evan's Song doesn't necessarily flow as well as it used to. Healers, you've got Doombringer, Cleric, Soothsayer, and Edgewalker is what I would recommend. Templar can be played as a healer, but it's more of a tank. And then Bards, Cleric, Caretaker, Phantasm, or Tomb Warden. You'll notice Clerics in both places as well. You can equally Bard and heal on Cleric. You can equally Bard on Caretaker. It's just, I'm a big fan of Bards. That's why I did a video specifically on Bards to show you how like force multiplier they are. All right, guys, and that is it for today. You will notice on the screen that the Archeage 101 website is now archeage101.com. Enough people were asking me for the link, and it was really long and ridiculous. So what I did is I just got the archeage101.com address. It will just link you to my Wix site for now. When we get a bit of downtime, I will spend and dedicate some time to fixing up the page and making it look good. Right now, I'm busy making video content, and you guys are keeping me busy on Twitch for like 7 hours at a time. So big thank yous to that. Really appreciate the support. If you need anything between now and my stream or now in my next video, get me on Discord, Jalon #0001. I may not answer you right away. I promise I will double back and keep checking to make sure I've gotten all of my answers. Plus, you will find if you leave a comment, 99% of the time you'll get an answer. All right, you guys take care. I got to get this in a post. I got to get this pushed out, and I got to get ready for Friday's stream. I will see you next time. What are you still doing here? Nobody ever stays this long. This is the end screen. Well, since you're here, there's a couple other videos I think you should check out. And all those names, those are my patrons over at Patreon. I couldn't do this without them. So, big thanks to them for all their support.